The sun was just beginning to dip behind the low hills surrounding the quiet rural town, casting a warm, golden hue over the parking lot of a roadside diner. The place was a local favourite: old neon sign, cracked pavement, a jukebox inside that only played songs older than most of the customers. It was the kind of town where people knew your business before you finished living it. Outside, Lieutenant Jade Callahan leaned against her civilian security vehicle, sipping a black coffee from a chipped mug. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes scanned everything. It was instinct, embedded from years on deployment. She was no longer in uniform, just khakis, boots, and a company-issued polo. But her bearings still carried the quiet strength of a Navy SEAL. Jade was working a quiet shift, doing off-hours patrol for local businesses. A job far below her capabilities, but one that gave her solitude and the distance she craved from the chaos she left behind in Afghanistan. Then it happened. A commotion near the side of the diner caught her eye. A local police officer had approached a disheveled homeless man sitting against the wall. Jade recognized him, an old veteran named Russell, known in town for muttering old radio codes and carving tiny wooden figures. He was harmless, but something was off. The officer, young and puffed with authority, barked aggressively at the old man. When Russell didn't move fast enough, the cop shoved him up against the wall. The man yelped, not in aggression, but confusion. Jade walked over quickly, calm but firm. She raised her voice, just enough to cut through. "Officer, he's not resisting. Stand down." The officer turned sharply. "Ma'am, step back. This doesn't concern you." "He's a veteran," she said evenly. "He's not a threat. Let me talk to him." The officer saw her security badge and laughed. "Oh, you one of those rent-a-cop types," he sneered. "Step back or get cuffed too." Jade didn't move. Her eyes locked with Russell's. He was trembling. Old memories were flooding back for him. Too many hands, too much noise. Then the officer grabbed her arm. That's when instinct kicked in. She twisted slightly, redirecting his grip. Nothing aggressive, nothing dangerous, just defensive. It was muscle memory, controlled. But someone across the lot saw it happen and shouted, "She hit a cop!" The officer radioed for backup before even regaining balance. He was red-faced now, embarrassed, and that turned into rage. "Down! On the ground! Now!" Jade didn't resist. She raised her hands and slowly knelt, staying silent. The cuffs went on tight, too tight. Her face never changed, but in her eyes, fire, disappointment, restraint. A crowd formed, phones out, recording everything. She said nothing as she was led to the patrol car. One woman asked, "What'd she even do?" Another whispered, "She was helping that guy. I saw it." The arrest was loud, unnecessary, brutal in how ordinary it was. The man she tried to protect was left behind, bewildered, his tiny wooden eagle crushed beneath someone's boot. And as the cruiser pulled away, no one, not the officers, not the bystanders, knew they had just arrested one of the deadliest snipers in SEAL history. No one knew her file was sealed under a presidential order. No one knew what it cost her to speak out at all. But the footage was out now. A woman handcuffed, calm, dignified, silenced. And the voiceover begins. They didn't know who she was, but soon the whole country would. The holding cell was cold and smelled of metal and disinfectant. Jade sat on the hard bench, hands resting on her knees, wrists raw from the tight cuffs. Her lip was slightly swollen, a bruise already blooming along her cheekbone. She didn't flinch. She didn't ask for anything. She simply stared forward, breathing slow and steady like she was counting down seconds in her head. Outside the cell, 2 officers leaned against the wall, laughing under their breath. One sipped coffee, the other scrolled through his phone, watching the arrest footage again. "She's one of those," one of them muttered. "Vet with PTSD, probably thought she was still in a war zone." Yeah, the other snorted. Probably thinks that homeless guy was her commanding officer or some crap. You know how they get. Full of glory stories and meds they don't take. They didn't know her name yet. Just female suspect, 40s, no priors. The desk sergeant hadn't bothered looking deeper. She didn't offer anything, didn't plead her case. She had learned long ago that silence was sometimes the only way to stay human in a system that wanted you to explain why you were bleeding. In her stillness, the memories came back. Not the headlines, not the medals, but the desert, the heat, the scope against her cheek. Afghanistan. She lay prone on a rooftop of an abandoned village house, camo blended and breathing through dust. Through her scope, 6 Taliban fighters approaching an Allied convoy. No clear shot, yet. Radio crackled in her ear. "Eagle 1, you got eyes?" She didn't respond with words. Just a slow exhale. Finger on the trigger. 1, 2, 3. All dropped in seconds. The 4th ducked, returning fire. "Jade, we're exposed!" her spotter, Miguel Rivas, called out. She adjusted, sniper to recon in less than a blink. She leapt down the building, covering fire laid in precision. They retreated through a dried riverbed, Miguel limping from shrapnel. Then the blast hit. She found herself half buried in the dirt, Miguel's blood soaking into her sleeve. He was still alive, whispering her name. "Callahan, keep going." She stayed. She didn't keep going. She killed 5 more that night, then dragged Miguel's lifeless body 3 miles back to base. The medal came a month later. She never wore it. Back in the present, the memory fades. The bench beneath her feels real again. Cold, hard, solid, something she can control. A public defender steps in briefly, asks her if she wants to plea. She declines. "I'll wait." For what? They'll find out. Her voice is quiet, clear. It unsettles him. After the war, she never went public. She didn't sell a book, didn't do interviews. She worked with the VA under an alias, designing reintegration programs for women veterans. Her name was on no plaques. She refused recognition. Once a senator offered her a ceremonial position. She declined. "I've done enough on paper," she had said. "Now I want to do something off it." She taught disabled veterans how to breathe through panic attacks, how to aim again, not with rifles, but with their lives. And now here she was, treated like a threat for doing what she'd always done, protecting someone who couldn't fight back. She heard the sergeant chuckle. "Bet she's wishing she kept her mouth shut." Jade looked down at her wrists. The skin was raw, her heart even rawer. She leaned her head back against the wall and closed her eyes, not from pain, but from exhaustion. The kind that doesn't come from lack of sleep, but from too many years pretending to be small. They had forgotten what a soldier looks like when they're not shouting, and they had no idea what they had just locked behind bars. The first ripple came from a teenager's phone. A shaky video posted with the caption, "Why did they arrest her when she was trying to help?" Within hours, that video hit 20,000 views. By morning, it had exploded into the millions. The footage was raw, a composed woman kneeling in surrender, handcuffed while trying to stop an officer from slamming a homeless man to the ground. Someone slowed it down, zoomed in, added captions. She didn't fight back. She de-escalated. She protected him. And then the internet did what the internet does. It started asking questions the authorities hadn't. Reddit threads exploded with theories. Some users noticed the way she moved. Controlled, precise, balanced. Not the average bystander. Another recognized her posture from an old military training video. Then someone unearthed a grainy group photo from nearly a decade ago. SEAL Team 9, Afghanistan, middle of the back row, a woman with piercing eyes and a rifle slung across her chest. "Holy shit," one user wrote. "That's her." Within 24 hours, her name was trending across all platforms. Reporters camped outside the county jail, Talk shows speculated on her background. Politicians tweeted hollow support. But the posts that hit hardest came from people who'd served with her. A Marine wrote, "Jade once saved my squad from a mortar ambush. She didn't even know our names. She just saw danger and handled it." Another said, "She doesn't just carry a rifle, she carries pain most of you will never understand, and she carried us through hell." Meanwhile, inside her cell, Jade remained calm. Her public defender rushed in, waving a tablet. "You're famous," he stammered. "The VA, the Pentagon, they're all calling. There's talk of presidential pardons, medals, honor ceremonies." Jade didn't flinch. She turned the offer down like a man brushing lint from his shoulder. "No interviews, no bail." He blinked. "Jade, this is your moment to walk free." "I'm not here for my moment," she said softly. "I'm here to remind them what they do to people who don't get trending hashtags." The guard outside scoffed. "You're turning down bail? Lady, are you nuts?" Jade didn't answer. She watched as the news twisted the narrative. Some tried to paint her as unstable, others as a war hero, some as a violent threat, others as a national treasure. But she wasn't interested in being a symbol. She wanted something bigger. She wanted the country to look, not at her, but at the thousands like her who never got filmed, who never got hashtags, who were cuffed, ignored, left on the pavement. So when the court date was set and reporters lined up, expecting her to speak, she walked past them in silence, wearing plain clothes, no makeup, no military ribbons. Not even a lawyer beside her, just a file tucked beneath her arm and her chin held high. The camera shutters clicked like gunfire, but she didn't blink, because Jade Callahan wasn't on trial. The system was. The courthouse buzzed like a hive under siege. Local reporters jostled with national crews for spots in the gallery. Protesters lined the courthouse steps, some carrying American flags, others holding cardboard signs that read, "She served, they shackled," and, "If she's not safe, who is?" Inside, the courtroom was divided by more than seating arrangements. On one side sat townspeople who saw her arrest as just another example of law and order. On the other, veterans in pressed uniforms, civilians with dog tags around their necks, and former soldiers in wheelchairs who had travelled cross-country just to be there. Jade entered through the side door, head high, in the same simple clothes she'd been wearing during her arrest. No insignia, no makeup, no drama. Judge Elliot Rourke, a man known for strict rulings and little patience, narrowed his eyes as she approached the defence table. Alone. No lawyer stood with her. "You are choosing to represent yourself, Ms. Callahan?" he asked flatly. "Yes, Your Honour," she said without hesitation. "You do understand the seriousness of these charges. I understand the difference between serious charges and serious people." A few murmurs rose from the back. The judge's gavel came down hard. The prosecution opened with a predictable tone, minimizing her background, focusing on the disruption she caused. They tried to paint her as someone with an inflated sense of heroism, someone who inserted herself where she wasn't needed. She escalated a lawful arrest, the DA claimed. It doesn't matter who she used to be. That night, she interfered with police duties and caused chaos. Jade stood calmly as the judge motioned for her response. She didn't raise her voice. She simply walked to the center, held up a photo, grainy, printed in black and white, from a declassified mission file. It showed a young Afghan girl clutching her baby brother, hidden behind a pile of debris. Beside them, a red dot from a Taliban sniper's scope glowed faintly. "I was that child's last hope," Jade said. "I didn't shoot back. I talked to him for 23 minutes through a translator, long enough for the child to be rescued. That sniper dropped his weapon and cried when we reached him." A pause filled the room. "That's what escalation looks like," she added. "What I did outside that diner was de-escalation." The officers didn't see a threat. They saw a woman who didn't flinch. And that scared them more than a weapon would have. Judge Rourke leaned back in his chair, visibly unsettled. Outside, the crowd grew. Tents popped up overnight. Veterans from all branches arrived in silence, lining the sidewalk in full uniform, standing watch like it was enemy territory. They held no signs, just stood at attention. Some saluted every time Jade passed. Some wept and said nothing. Inside, the tone of the courtroom shifted. The jury leaned forward more with each word. Even the bailiff, who had once joked about her being another messed-up vet, now stood straighter when she entered. Jade continued calmly, day by day, citing procedures, referencing both police policy and psychological de-escalation tactics. She dismantled the prosecution's narrative piece by piece, not with emotion, but precision. The press didn't know how to handle her. She gave no fiery statements, no tears for the cameras, only clear facts and unwavering presence. One evening, Judge Rourke returned from recess to find a stack of letters on his bench. Statements from over 300 veterans who had served alongside or under Jade. Some typed, some handwritten in shaky script. They didn't plead for her innocence. They demanded recognition of her integrity. He didn't read them aloud, but he didn't throw them out either. And as the trial continued, so did the protests. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a reckoning. Rain tapped steadily on the courthouse roof that night, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. Most of the protesters had gone quiet under tents and ponchos, holding candles, shielding flags. A sense of stillness settled over the scene. But it wasn't peace. It was the calm that always comes before something historic. At exactly 2:11 a.m., a black SUV with government plates pulled into a reserved parking space near the courthouse's side entrance. No sirens, no escorts, just a vehicle, spotless and silent, rolling to a stop. From the back seat stepped a tall man in civilian clothes, grey overcoat, silver hair cut in a precise military fade. He walked with a cane, though not for show. Each step was deliberate, grounded. He stood in the rain without an umbrella, scanning the courthouse facade with a weight behind his eyes. Admiral Charles Hale. Retired, but never idle. Once commander of Naval Special Warfare Group 2. Decorated beyond measure. Feared in Washington, revered among SEALs. He had watched the headlines in silence for days, watched the footage, read the articles, ignored the pundits. And with each passing hour, a gnawing shame took root in him. Not because of what Jade had done, but because he hadn't done anything yet. Flashback, Kandahar Province, 2014, a village raid gone sideways. Intel was wrong. Hostiles had set a trap, and the convoy carrying Hale's son, Lieutenant Aaron Hale, was hit with IEDs on both sides. Chaos erupted. Smoke, blood, screams. Jade, positioned miles away as Overwatch, had no direct orders to intervene. She'd already completed her mission. She could have evacuated, but she didn't. She rerouted solo, weaving through mined roads in an abandoned enemy truck, reaching the convoy as bullets still flew. With nothing but her rifle and a sidearm, she covered the medics, shielded Aaron with her own body, and got him out. He lost a leg, but he lived. And every day since, Admiral Hale had carried that in his chest. Not just gratitude, a debt. Now, nearly a decade later, the woman who saved his son was sitting in a cell, criminalized for defending another soldier's dignity. He couldn't remain silent any longer. Inside a nearby veterans' hall, the lights were still on. He entered quietly. There, waiting for him, were men and women he had called upon in the past 24 hours. High-ranking generals, Purple Heart recipients, Special Forces retirees, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes. One Marine was wheeled in by his wife. He'd lost both legs, but insisted on being present. Another man wore a full-dress uniform, despite missing most of his right arm. These weren't protesters. They were reinforcements. The room was quiet as Hale stepped forward. No speeches, no ceremony, just a simple plan. Tomorrow, he said, we show them what honor looks like. Not through words, not through politics, but presence. They nodded, some saluted, others bowed their heads in silence. Across the street, in her dim cell, Jade sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, as if sensing something in the wind had shifted. She didn't know who would come. She didn't need to. At sunrise, a formation appeared on the courthouse steps. Not loud, not angry, just a line of figures in decorated uniforms, some limping, some upright, some leaning on one another. At the center stood Admiral Hale, not in uniform, but with his medals pinned to his overcoat. They carried no banners, no chants, just silence, and one message, carved into the side of a wooden crate beside them. We do not abandon our own. The system had ignored her. The press had tried to shape her. The courtroom had tried to silence her. But now, the people she bled for were standing beside her. And tomorrow, the whole world would watch. The courtroom was packed to the walls. Every bench held a row of tense, breathless bodies. Journalists scribbling notes. Veterans sitting ramrod straight in their dress uniforms. Townsfolk torn between pride and confusion. Protesters stood outside, lining the sidewalk in solemn silence, while national news anchors spoke in whispers just outside the double doors. Judge Rourke rapped his gavel once. Court is now in session. As he began to speak, a stir moved through the room, first as a whisper, then a visible shift of bodies turning toward the entrance. The doors opened slowly, and in stepped Admiral Charles Hale, in full military dress uniform, chest glinting with rows of medals, ribbons, and the unmistakable gleam of 4 silver stars on each shoulder. The courtroom fell into a stunned hush. The judge stopped mid-sentence. The stenographer's fingers hovered over the keys. Even the prosecutor looked like someone had knocked the air out of him. Hale didn't pause. He walked past the spectators, past the defense table, past Jade, who sat motionless, her expression unreadable. He came to a stop directly in front of the judge. "Your Honor," he said, voice strong. "Permission to address the court as a character witness." The judge blinked. I wasn't informed." "You weren't," Hale replied calmly. "But I'm here now." For a long moment, no one breathed. Judge Rourke hesitated, then nodded. "Permission granted." Admiral Hale turned to face the courtroom. His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I am Admiral Charles Hale. I served this country for 42 years. In that time, I've issued orders that shaped the lives of thousands. I've promoted, reprimanded, buried, and commended more service members than I care to count." He looked toward Jade. "But only one ever saved my son." A rustle moved through the crowd. "She didn't do it for recognition. She didn't do it for glory. She did it because it was right. Because when others followed protocol, she followed conscience." He paused. "She doesn't need me to defend her actions. Her actions already speak louder than any defense I could give. But I'm not here to recount what she did in uniform." He turned back to the judge. "I'm here because I've watched what she did out of uniform. After the battlefield, in silence, helping veterans re-enter a world that forgets them, rescuing those the system discards, including your own citizens." Then, without theatrics, without grandstanding, Admiral Hale removed the Distinguished Service Cross from his chest. He walked to the judge's bench and placed it on the polished wood before him. "This was given to me for leadership during a mission she risked her life to make possible, but I have never worn it without remembering whose courage made it matter. It belongs closer to her name than mine." A single, quiet sob escaped from someone in the gallery. Another veteran stood to attention, then another, then another. Rows of uniforms stood, saluting in perfect, echoing unity, not in protest, in reverence. Even the judge looked visibly shaken, his gavel frozen in midair. Jade, still seated, turned slightly to look at the man she once carried through a battlefield, now carrying her through a courtroom. She didn't cry, she didn't smile, she simply bowed her head, and for a moment, the entire courtroom was still, not in shock, not in awe, but in humility. Because this wasn't just a trial anymore, it was a reckoning. And in that silence, something shifted, not in the law, not in the rules, but in the hearts of everyone who bore witness. Judge Rourke sat stiffly behind the bench, shoulders tense, fingertips pressed together in silent thought. For several long minutes after Admiral Hale's address, he said nothing. His gaze wandered from Jade Callahan, still calm and composed at the defense table, to the Distinguished Service Cross resting on the bench like a quiet accusation. The courtroom waited. Finally, the judge cleared his throat. His voice was thinner than before, less authority, more awareness. This court has reviewed the evidence. We've heard testimony. We've witnessed the strength of a woman who has served this country with distinction, both on and off the battlefield. He paused, breathing slowly through his nose. It is the opinion of this court, he continued, his voice steadying, that the charges against Lieutenant Jade Callahan, retired, are not only without merit, but a troubling reflection of the system's failure to recognize service, dignity, and restraint. A collective breath released in the gallery. Some covered their mouths. Others reached for tissues. In light of this, Judge Rourke declared, all charges against Ms. Callahan are hereby dismissed. Applause did not erupt. No one cheered. Instead, a reverent silence washed over the room. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, he said, turning toward the prosecution table, this court is requesting an emergency review into the conduct of the arresting officers. Their use of force, their failure to identify, and their disregard for context will be reviewed by an independent oversight committee. The two officers in question, seated stiffly behind the prosecutor, exchanged nervous glances. One paled, the other looked down. Until that review is complete, the judge added, those officers are placed on administrative leave. It was as close to an apology as the system could offer, and yet Jade didn't flinch. She rose slowly from her seat as the judge looked at her. Ms. Callahan, he said, do you wish to make a statement? She stepped forward, not to the center, not to the cameras, but just enough so the room could hear her. I'm not here for vindication, she said quietly, or recognition. Her voice carried without force, the kind of calm that settles over a battlefield after the final shot. I only ask this. The next time you see a veteran sleeping outside your courtroom, or standing on a street corner with nothing but memories and silence, treat them with the dignity you failed to give me. She let that sit. No drama, no anger, just truth. Then she nodded once and returned to her seat. Even the prosecutor, previously eager and self-righteous, didn't rise for rebuttal. He sat, hands folded tightly, as if he too had begun to understand the gravity of what had unfolded. The gavel struck. Court was adjourned, and yet no one moved. Not at first. Then the veterans began to rise, not just in the gallery, but outside too, one by one, saluting, holding flags to their hearts. A few pressed palms against the courthouse glass, watching her walk past with her head high, free. No medal on her chest, no need. The courtroom had tried to label her as a defendant, but in the end, all they could see was a warrior. A quiet sun filtered through the tall windows of the newly renovated community centre on 4th and Jefferson, formerly an abandoned library, now transformed into something with purpose, memory, and mission. A new wooden sign above the front entrance read, in clean, carved letters, "The Rivas House, for those still fighting." Inside, Walls that once held dusty books now bore framed photographs of servicewomen in uniform, some smiling, some solemn, some missing limbs, but all unforgotten. A wall-sized mural near the main hallway depicted a silhouette of a female soldier crouched behind a wall, hand extended to another woman standing in civilian clothes. Below it, in gold paint, one war ends, another begins. Jade Callahan walked through the centre slowly, taking in every detail, not for approval, but for reverence. She'd poured her entire settlement from the city, undisclosed in amount, into this place, not to make a statement, but to build something that would last longer than hashtags. The centre wasn't flashy. It had no ribbon cutting, no press release, but it had a gym, therapy rooms, dorm-style bunks, and a rooftop garden where women sat in the evenings talking about things only they understood. It wasn't for every veteran. It was for her kind, the kind who never asked for help but showed up for others, the kind who didn't want sympathy, only space, the kind who still had fight in them but didn't know where to aim it anymore, and it was named for someone who never got the chance. In the front lobby hung a photograph of Lieutenant Miguel Rivas, the only man Jade ever trusted to watch her back. Underneath was a quote he once told her after a firefight. "I don't want statues or speeches, I just want to matter after I'm gone." Now he did. In the rec room, Admiral Hale stood beside a coffee pot, pouring 2 cups, and smiling as he handed one to a retired Marine who'd lost her hearing in Iraq. He volunteered here every Wednesday, quietly, without ceremony, sweeping floors, teaching job interview skills, writing letters for vets whose hands trembled too much to hold a pen. He never spoke publicly again about the trial. He didn't need to. This was his apology to her, and to the others he'd once overlooked. In one of the back training rooms, Jade led a small class of teenage girls from the local community in basic self-defense. No military jargon, no glory tales, just simple, powerful instruction. She corrected their stances, showed them how to break a grip, how to breathe through fear. One girl, maybe 14, looked up at her during a rest break and whispered, "Were you really a sniper?" Jade knelt to her eye level. "I was really a lot of things, but you're learning to be something even stronger." The girl nodded with fierce pride. Later that night, after the lights dimmed and the last of the volunteers had left, Jade sat alone in her small office near the garden. A letter sat on her desk, no return address, just her name typed on the front. She opened it. "I didn't know who you were. I judged you in seconds. I followed protocol instead of instinct. You showed me what real strength looks like. I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed you to know I was sorry." She read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a small wooden box with a handful of other items, Miguel's dog tags, a dried sunflower from the mural dedication, and now the letter. She closed the box. No reply needed, because some forgiveness isn't spoken, it's lived. The sky above the Rivas house was painted in soft hues of morning gold and fading night blue. As a small crowd gathered outside, for a moment they hadn't rehearsed, but would never forget, veterans stood at silent attention, hands clasped in front or behind their backs. Local kids sat cross-legged on the lawn, craning their necks. Volunteers in plain t-shirts passed out small flags and coffee. There was no podium, no music, no grandstanding, just a cloth-covered mural, waiting. Jade Callahan stood to the side, dressed in a simple black shirt and jeans. No medals, no boots, only a soft leather bracelet on her wrist, Rivas's initials engraved in it. Admiral Hale stood beside her, hands behind his back, saying nothing. When the tarp was gently pulled down, gasps floated up like dandelion seeds. The mural stretched across the length of the building's front wall. A woman in silhouette crouched low with a sniper rifle across her back, not in an act of violence, but watchfulness. Behind her, a line of children holding hands, walking safely past. Painted beneath the image in clean, solemn lettering, "Not all warriors shout, some just aim true." For a long while, no one spoke. Then a small girl, perhaps no older than 8, tugged gently on Jade's shirt. "Is that you?" she asked. Jade looked down, her face softening. She knelt to the child's level, her voice quiet but certain. "It could be," she said, "but maybe it's you." The girl's eyes lit up. "Can girls be snipers too?" Jade smiled, brushing a lock of hair behind the girl's ear. "You can be whatever makes you brave." The girl didn't say anything, just nodded slowly, the kind of nod that marks the planting of a dream. Later, as the sun dipped behind the building and the crowd drifted away, Jade stood alone near the wall of honor inside the Revis house. A quiet hallway lined with nameplates, photos, folded flags. She pulled a small bundle from her backpack, a folded seal patch, her unit insignia, and the carefully pressed American flag once handed to her after Miguel's memorial. One by one, she placed them beneath his dog tags, which had hung there since the day the center opened. No speeches, no notes, just her hand resting on the cold metal for a beat longer than expected. She whispered, "We did it," then turned to leave. Final scene, a wide shot of the Revis house glowing under the evening sky. A line of silhouettes, men, women, children, walking past the mural as if passing through the shadow of something sacred. Inside, the lights flicker on. The door opens. New veterans walk in, some limping, some quiet. All of them carrying their own ghosts. But now, they have a place to put them. And as Jade disappears into the hallway behind the lobby, her voice speaks softly over the final images. They handcuffed her in silence. But when he saluted, the world stood up. Not for what she did in war, but for how she fought for peace.